Hello, my name's Julie Hodges and I'd like to welcome you to this module on sustaining change in organisations. The aim of the module is to look at how we actually not only manage change but how we sustain it. The module learning outcomes are first of all to critically evaluate the theories of change and how they apply in different contexts. So we'll look at how we take the different theories and how they apply in the different sectors, for example, the public, the private, the non-profit. The next learning outcome is to recognise and diagnose the need for change using appropriate techniques. So we'll do that by looking at a number of diagnostic frameworks, such as 7S, COPS and the Burke-Litwin model. The next learning outcome is to shape implementation strategies using appropriate techniques for sustaining change interventions. So once we've identified the need and the readiness for change, how do we go about identifying the best appropriate interventions to address that need? And then the final learning outcome is to effectively lead and manage people through change. To make change embedded in an organisation and sustained, then to be able to do that through people is the most important aspect. Change involves not only managing, but also leading people. So we'll look at some of the elements of both of those that you need to be aware of when sustaining change in organisations. Let me just take you through the 9-week agenda for this module. We'll start off by looking at the nature of change. That's when we'll look at the theoretical grounding for change, covering theories such as incremental theory, the transformational change theory, and also we'll look at punctuated equilibrium theory. Within that, we'll also look at planned versus emergent change. In week 2, we'll look at recognising and diagnosing the need for change. So what are the key elements we need to look out for in terms of the drivers in the environment? So the external triggers for change, but also the internal triggers for change. So we'll look at how we can do that, and we'll also look at a number of models that will help you in terms of doing that diagnostic. In that week, we'll also cover looking at what happens when organisations are not recognising the need for change. What happens when they become complacent? Week 3 is all about leading and managing people through change. A key element of being able to sustain change within an organisation is not only how we manage them, but also how we lead them. Week 4 is about shaping intervention strategies. So once we've identified the need for change, we've recognised that there's a readiness for change in the organisation. How do we start to identify some of the intervention strategies, whether that's at an organisational level, a team level, or an individual level? Week 5 will focus on planning and implementing change. So what are some of the key elements that we need to know about planning change, both from identifying at the beginning the benefits of the change and the risks of change? And I'll also show you a model there which is very helpful in terms of how we implement change and highlights some of the key elements that we need to be considering. Week 6 looks at the impact of change on people's attitudes and behaviours. We often talk about people resisting change, and that therefore change is looked at from a negative perspective. But what I want to talk about is slightly different, about how people actually react to change, and that can be in a negative way or it can be in a positive way. For some people, change is actually seen as very positive. So I want to look at in terms of the reactions to change and how, as managers and leaders, we can manage these attitudes and behaviours towards change. Week 7 will focus on communicating change. This is another key element to sustaining change in organisations. Not only what we communicate, but how we communicate, and how we communicate throughout a change process. Week 8 is about learning from change. I'm sure you'll all recognise that there have been times when change has failed in an organisation. But we want to look at how do we learn from that failure, as well as how we learn from successes, and how do we put that into practice. Finally, in week 9, we'll pull all of our learning together and we'll look at the key elements about sustaining change and transformation in organisations. Each week builds upon the other, and for each week there will be a number of activities on Duo that you'll be asked to do, group activities, individual activities. There's also recommended reading, and we will be having a number of discussions on the discussion board. So I'd highly recommend that you engage with these discussions because they form a key part of the learning of this module. The module will be assessed both through a formative assessment and a summative assignment. The essential reading for this is a book that I have written myself with Professor Roger Gill, which is about sustaining change in organisations. This book looks not only at the theories of change, but it looks at how it's applied in practice. And it has a number of case studies that have been written by managers and leaders in organisations. Thank you. I hope you found this session helpful.